So, thank you for being here. We have the last panel of the day and actually of the conference. Third day, WNE 2025. I hope you all have some great memories now and going to get some more this coming hour. And after that, we will have a wrap up. So now with me, which is a very important panel, and that is the climate focus. We are going to talk about nuclear energy and the climate equation from COP21 to COP30 and beyond. So give a warm hand to my fellow journalistic colleague. He is from Nuclear Intelligence Weekly, and his name is Philip Chaffee. Welcome up on stage. Warm hand for the moderator. Thank you. Looking forward to this.
Thanks so much, Linda. We are actually going to start. We have a fascinating panel discussion ahead, but before that, I'm going to introduce François-Marie Bréon, who is a climate expert at the CEA and has been very involved with the IPCC, which he is going to talk about now.
So, hello everyone. So my name is François-Marie Bréon, and indeed I am a climate scientist, but I have been very much involved in promoting nuclear energy in the past 20 years or something. And I was asked to provide you some information about the IPCC and the COP, because there is a lot of misunderstanding about that. So let me recall that IPCC actually was established in 1998 by the United Nations. And the objectives of IPCC is to provide information about climate change, the impact of climate change, and what can be done to mitigate climate change. The work of IPCC is to produce reports every 7 years. And something that most people do not know is that actually there are 3 different reports. One is about the physics of climate, and that's the part I was the most involved in. So it involves a climate scientist. There is another report about the impact of climate change. And finally, there is a report about the mitigation of climate change. And obviously, the nuclear energy is discussed and evaluated as an option in that 3rd report. Nuclear is not discussed in the first or in the 2nd report. Then you have the IPCC and you have the COP. And let me really stress that IPCC and COP are really fully independent. Again, IPCC provides the scientific analysis of the climate risk and the mitigation option. It's based on the scientific literature. But IPCC are not prescriptive. They describe and evaluate options, but they do not recommend any option. They don't say, okay, you can do that, it will cost as much, you will have that obstacle to face and that kind of thing. And then on the other hand, the COP conference aim at deciding climate policy based on the options that are discussed in the IPCC report. So the COP involves mostly state representatives, people who can actually make decisions based on the evaluation that is provided by IPCC. So let me now come back and give a state of the climate and the state of the energy in the world. I hope that you know that carbon dioxide is increasing in the atmosphere. And because carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, it tends to increase the greenhouse effect, and this tends to warm the climate. And this is why we have had a warming of the Earth of about 1.5 degrees since the end of the 19th century. And basically, in the past 50 years, the Earth has warmed by about 0.2 degrees per decade. So the carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, and that leads to climate change. And so where does this carbon dioxide come from? It comes mostly from fossil fuel use. So coal, petrol, and gas are fossil fuel, and the use of those fossil fuel led to emission in the atmosphere. You also have the land use change, basically deforestation, is also a source of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It was the primary cause for carbon dioxide increase in the atmosphere at the beginning of the 20th century, but now it's only on the order of 10%. And so these fossil fuel, you have coal, oil, and gas. And as you can see on this graph shows the emission, the carbon dioxide emission that are linked to the use of coal, oil, and gas. And you can see that coal is actually the dominant factor of carbon dioxide increase in the atmosphere, because the emission of carbon dioxide are on the order of 4 gigaton per year for coal, and on the order of 3 gigaton for oil, and on the order of 2 gigaton for gas. Now, if you want to look at the future, you know that the COP21 said that during the COP21, the states decided that all the efforts will be made so that the warming of the Earth will be limited to less than 2 degrees, with an objective of staying less than 1.5 degrees, or as close as possible to 1.5 degrees, and in all measure, less than 2 degrees. And those graphs here shows the trajectories of carbon dioxide emission that lead to either 1.5 degree, 2 degrees, or 3 degrees, or 5 degrees at the end of the century. So basically, if we want to limit the global warming of the atmosphere to 2 degrees, we have to be carbon neutral before 2080. And if we want to limit the warming at 1.7 degrees, we have to be carbon neutral by about 2050. And you see that it is a tremendous effort, because the carbon dioxide emissions have been increasing continuously during the 20th century and up to 2024. And we will need to decrease those emissions extremely rapidly in the forthcoming decades. At present, this graph shows the use of energy in the world. And so you know that in this conference here, we discuss nuclear energy, but as you can see, nuclear energy currently in the world is much less than 10%. 80% of the energy in the world is from fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. And so we have, in the next decades, to get rid of all of these and really to develop either to decrease of our consumption of energy, or to increase extremely rapidly the low carbon energy, which are hydroelectricity, the other renewable, or nuclear. At present, what is shown on the graph on the right side of this image is the consumption, the use of coal in the world, and you can see that the use of coal in the world has decreased in the Western countries, in Europe, in the United States and Canada, but conversely, this use of coal has increased and continued to increase actually in other parts of the world, and in particular in Asia. And so this is really what we need to get rid of as rapidly as possible. We need to get rid of the use of coal and gas when we produce electricity. And so let me have a look at the electricity. Obviously, the share is a bit different. On the left side of this graph, you have how electricity is produced in the world. So you have the black share is the coal, the purple share is the gas, and then you have nuclear, renewable, and hydroelectricity. And I wanted to compare what is the mean electricity mix in the world, which is shown on the left part of the graph, to the electricity mix on the right side of the graph, that is for France. And as you can see, in France, more than 75% of the electricity is generated by nuclear. And actually, if you look at a history of that, and so this graph shows the history of electricity production in France, you see that back in the 70s, the largest fraction of electricity production in France was from fossil fuel. and it was possible in 10 years to get rid of the vast majority of this fossil fuel and to have a shift from fossil fuel to nuclear in a context of increasing electricity demand. And so I think that the idea will be to do the same thing at the global scale in as many as possible countries in the world. Many countries can do the same kind of effort as what France did back in 50 to 40 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you so much, François-Marie. That was a great presentation, but also a sobering presentation. There is still quite the challenge ahead for the world, and the main way the world has sort of together thought about meeting that is through COP. This COP process is the convention of the parties, and nuclear has not always had a role at the table at COP. So we are now going to discuss a bit of the history of COP and nuclear. For that discussion, I'll introduce the two other panelists here. Julieta Romero is with Nuclear for Climate, which I'm sure you will describe what you are trying to do. And the other panelist needs no introduction, I think. Dr. Sama Bilbao y León is the Director General of the World Nuclear Association and manages to wave the flag of nuclear at just about every energy conference out there. Sama, I will start with you and sort of travel back in time 25, 30 years ago. How did people at COP think about nuclear? Was there any role for it? What was the situation?
So, good afternoon, everybody. You just noticed that he called me old. No, I'm kidding. No, so, you know, my first climate change conference was in 1999. So yes, it was 26 years ago. I was a student at the time, and this was one of the first conferences or COP meetings in which the nuclear industry was already engaged. So maybe let me give you a vision. So as you know, 1992, there was the Earth Conference where it was determined that there was human-made emissions that were potentially changing the climate. And there was a decision from the United Nations to put together a global coalition to assess the problem and to solve it. So then we started to have these conferences of the parties to discuss this problem. So I will tell you that the nuclear industry at the time, the global nuclear industry, did participate from the very beginning. At COP3, the third COP in Kyoto, which is when the Kyoto Protocol was written and signed, the nuclear industry was already there. And frankly, I think that most people were looking at us thinking like, who are you and what are you doing here? But we still, we understood that obviously nuclear energy had a very important role to play when it comes to providing abundant, affordable 24/7 energy and electricity without any emissions. So this is why we were there. So maybe you know a little bit about this, but I will take a second to remind you. So COP3, so the third meeting of the parties, is when the Kyoto Protocol was written. And this is very important because the Kyoto Protocol was the very first time that we actually had an objective. So it was quantified. There was a time limit, and there were actually, in theory, consequences if you didn't meet those goals. And perhaps the only backslash, if you wish, of the Kyoto Protocol is that only developed countries had commitments. So what we call the Annex 1 countries, the most developed countries, had commitments to reduce their carbon emissions by some specific amount in a given timeline. So this is COP3. So now afterwards, there was a lot of work to design how to implement this, right? And what happened is that very quickly, nuclear energy was targeted by the anti-nuclear non-government organizations, the environmental lobby, as the victim of this. So we actually worked very hard to make sure that nuclear was not excluded from being a technology that could be used to combat climate change. So we kind of succeeded, but not really. So if you look at the language at COP6 for the implementation of the Kyoto Protocol, it says something like, countries will refrain from using nuclear energy. So it's not excluded. So that was a successful story, but in reality, well, you know, people were recommended not to use it. So that was our work. So we tried to be there on the ground, talking to everybody, explaining what is the role of nuclear energy, but we were definitely not very welcome.
Julieta, I'd like to move over to you. When did you enter this conversation? I mean, there's been a seismic shift in the last 10 years, which I think you've been part of, but I wonder if you could just discuss a bit of that, and also specifically at COP.
Yeah, of course. So, well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you all for this amazing panelist. I'm very humbled to be here, really. And as you said, Phil, there was a shift. I would say in COP21 already, in the Paris Agreement, there was already a shift, right? We had to move from words to action at some point, and I think the COP21 was 2015, if I'm not wrong. It was the moment where there was this agreement that ended up leading us to where we are basically right now, right? Looking at the next COPs, looking at the global stock day that has been done. So many things happened there, and nuclear there, and what I'm come to talk here is nuclear for climate, was born a little bit before COP21. And Nuclear for Climate is an initiative of over 150 associations. It's professionals, it's scientists. Was at the beginning with European Nuclear Society, American Nuclear Society, French Nuclear Society. So these associations got together with the same goal, which was open the dialogue about including nuclear in the narrative, in the climate change combat. Why? Because we need nuclear energy to help fight climate change. We needed to, as you were showing, François-Marie, we needed to cover all this energy demand that we are having, that right now coal is covering. So that's when it started. And then Nuclear for Climate had a little presence there. And ever since, it started growing more and more. Every COP, every conference. I think I would say it's COP26 and 27 were kind of a pivotal moment. Also, IAEA started being there. Net zero, there were more initiatives also there to jump in the momentum of nuclear. And I think I'm sorry if I'm getting too ahead, but at some point, well, and we will discuss for sure, but COP28 started to be like a very, very big deal and an important thing that maybe you want to talk about.
I mean, could you, I remember it, it was just 2 years ago, but there was a lot of nuclear news out of that. Could you discuss that a bit, Sama?
So COP28, we felt that it was a unique opportunity, as Julieta said. We have seen you know, already COP21, which was, no, COP26, which was supposed to be Glasgow. So if you remember, it was middle of COVID, it was a little bit confusing. So that was when the first global stock take was supposed to take place. Obviously, we were all delayed and we were not quite there yet. But what happened at that event is that many countries realized that the math was simply not going to add up. They saw very clearly that it was not possible to meet their ambitions to decarbonize without using nuclear energy. So as Julieta said, we started to see a little bit of chin scratching. People were like, how are we going to do this? So we decided to make the most of this opportunity. And of course, Dubai, having Baraka, a brand new nuclear power plant in a newcomer country, which is probably not what we would normally think as a traditional nuclear country, given that they have lots of oil and gas and many other natural resources, gave us a great opportunity. So we decided to put this coalition between governments and industry, because as you know, the governments are the actors in the COP negotiations. Industry or non-government organizations, we are simply observers. We don't, I mean, we have a voice, but it's an informal voice. So this is what we wanted to talk to, we wanted to engage with governments. So I don't know how many of you remember, but at COP28, the COP28 presidency had all these very lofty goals. Triple global renewable capacity by 2030, triple energy efficiency by I don't know when, double, I mean, so they had all these very many goals. And we tried to convince them to include triple global nuclear capacity by 2050. And they looked at us like, no. So they actually told us, well, you know, Sama, we are having these conversations with many countries, and nobody's mentioned nuclear, so I don't see why we should have nuclear in the agenda. So we told them, okay, we'll bring you some countries. And this is what we were able to do. This is a lot of work from many people. This is a fabulous coalition, and this is where we were able to bring 23 countries, 25 countries by the end of COP28, all of them. I mean, and we had heads of state, President Macron, we had John Kerry, we had, you know, it was at the highest level, stating very boldly that they were supporting the tripling of global nuclear capacity by 2050. So as you said, this was a complete shift. We could go to the presidency and tell them, here it is, I have 25 countries. So this is, I mean, and of course, very importantly, we had 199 countries mentioning nuclear energy as one of the technologies that need to be accelerated to actually meet global climate change goals. So it was like a perfect storm of governments, civil society, industry, NGOs, recognizing the essential role of nuclear today. I mean, today and for the last 50 years or more, but more importantly, moving forward.
And that gets us to today. And I think even today and tomorrow, the heads of state are already meeting in Brazil. They are not at Belém, which is a bit out of the way, but starting, I think, Monday, all of the delegates will be in Belém in Brazil. Sama, I think you're going over the weekend. This question is open to all three of you. I'm not sure who wants to answer. What are your hopes, maybe for actually all three of you? And we'll start with you, François-Marie. What are your hopes for this COP? What do you want to see in it?
Well, I do hope that there will be some new commitment of reducing the use of fossil fuel, and also a new commitment of reducing the deforestation, because as you know, it's also a source of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, but it's also damaging the environment and the biodiversity. So I really hope that there will be some new commitment about that. I don't see that coming. I'm hoping, but being realistic, I'm not sure that this will happen. And then, okay, so for climate, really, the question is reduce carbon dioxide emission. How do you do that is not really the question. So as a climate scientist, I don't have to decide how the country will decide to do that. And maybe the way to do that depends on the country. You do not have the same requirement, you do not have the same capabilities for using renewable energy, and you also need some technical capacities to develop nuclear. So I don't really care what the countries choose for the way that they will reduce their emission, but my hope is that they realize really what is the threat of climate change and the urgency of limiting our emissions. and so that they take commitment during that conference.
Beate?
Yeah, I agree with you, François-Marie. I know that during this COP there are some countries that still need to give their strategies, their NDCs, so they need to tell actually how they will achieve these targets, and I really hope they include nuclear. And also I want to bring up that it's interesting that this COP is in Brazil because it's in the global south. And for me, this is very interesting. I'm from Argentina, so for me, this touches a very special place in my heart because I think there is always a lot of perspective from the global north countries, and it's very interesting to move this conversation to the south. Even by moving it physically, you know how hard it is at some point because there is many difficulties already to go to Belém, and I think. In the financing, in all these kind of restraints normally Global South has, it would be very nice to see some support to nuclear.
Sama.
Well, from our side, as always, as the association, together with many others, we will continue to be there, bringing visibility to the essential role of nuclear energy in the context of climate change. So obviously, what we will continue to do at this COP, as we've done for the last 20 years, is these conversations with everybody, with the delegates, with the other NGOs, with the multilateral organizations, etc., to clarify the sustainability case for nuclear energy. So this is a little bit of an advocacy role that we continue to do together, of course, with Nuclear for Climate and together with the International Atomic Energy Agency. So we do follow very closely all the negotiations because I don't know, I mean, so many of you probably follow COP and you are very familiar with the more flashy part of COP, the exhibitions, the panels, the discussions, the pavilions, but the reality is that the real work is taking place in much more boring settings where, as you guys very well know, the negotiations are taking place. So we also do a lot of work to follow up the negotiations to make sure that the wording that is being used in the different agreements that are moving forward is nuclear inclusive, or certainly not nuclear exclusive. So, this is something that we definitely do. So like, for example, you know, when maybe many of you followed last year, COP29, the big topic was financing and financing the countries that are suffering the brunt of the climate change already, how to to help them recover. So, you know, when you look at the language, sometimes in the language says, and we will support this or that, for example, for renewable energy. So this is where we actually are very active to say, no. It shouldn't say renewable energy. It should say clean energy, or it should say carbon-free energy, or, I mean, we need to find a technology-neutral terminology. And so that's something that we were doing last year. They were also doing the Article 6, which is very technical, but essentially is the carbon markets, which is very important moving forward, right? Because that is going to help to set the price of energy and to set the price of carbon emissions. So once again, how do we what type of projects or what type of initiatives are going to get credit for the emissions that they avoid or for the emissions that they capture. So we need to make sure that it doesn't say renewables or CCUS, or it says carbon-free technologies or clean technologies. So that's what we are trying to do at this COP, as we have done at different COPs, to make sure that the point of view of nuclear energy is well covered, and to make sure that we continue to have this conversation.
It strikes me that one of the interesting things about this COP is one of the two world superpowers no longer believes in climate change, has withdrawn from the Paris process, or the Paris Treaty, and if the experience of the International Maritime Organization is any metric, is likely thinking up ways to blow things up at Belém. But the Trump administration also loves nuclear. And I think one of the fascinating attributes of nuclear power is it is a powerful tool for decarbonization, but it's also a powerful tool for energy security. And it can sort of get advocates who don't believe in one or the other, but are still committed to it. Do you see, particularly on the tripling nuclear pledge, possible bringing in further countries or possible advances for the countries that have agreed to triple nuclear, even if there's not formal progress made, or a final statement out of COP? Yeah.
Maybe an advance. So as you mentioned, we will be in Belém on Monday. In fact, probably some of my colleagues are already flying over there as we speak. And one thing that we will do while we are there is we will launch the first edition of the World Nuclear Outlook report, which essentially does what you said. It's a little bit of a stock take of how well or not so well we are doing at a global level to actually meet the triple nuclear goals. So that's something that we will be doing. That was one of our commitments. We thought it was very important to have a goal to triple nuclear, but it was very important to track it. So that's what we are trying to do. So that's one of the things that we are going to do. When it comes to the fact that some of the major players may not be there, this is not the first time that the United States is outside of the negotiations. The way I look at this, the COP meeting is not about nuclear, it's about hopefully meeting the climate goals. And as we just heard, this is very scary. I mean, the fact that in 2025, about the same percentage of electricity is produced with carbon-free energy sources as in 1986. That's very scary to me. So let's not make, this is not about nuclear, this is about creating a global energy system that is as carbon-free as possible, while we make sure that, we have energy security and making sure that certainly everybody, but in particular the Global South, has access to socioeconomic development, prosperity, quality of life, and all those things. So that's what I think is important.
Pilar, did you want to add anything? Or?
No,
Okay.
I think it was perfect what she said. I honestly agree.
Fantastic. François-Marie, one of the things that jumped out at me from your slides was the France slide. And you highlighted this 10-year period. I don't know if we can put it up again. I mean, I can just describe it. You highlighted this 10-year period where France basically built out almost its entire nuclear fleet. Are there lessons to be learned from that experience as all of these countries talk about tripling nuclear?
I think the only thing that you can learn from that is that it's possible. Okay, so everyone who says that it's not possible should look at that and say, hey, if that was done 50 years ago, it can be done today. Maybe we have forgotten something, maybe we put too much regulation, but you cannot say that it's physically impossible. Okay, so that's the main thing. So fighting climate change, achieving carbon neutrality in 40 or 50 years will be extremely difficult. It's obvious, it will be extremely difficult. It will require very large efforts. So maybe part of those very large efforts should be put into the development of this nuclear capacity, and maybe put in those large efforts so that we can do the same as what was done 50 years ago. It's possible. It's obviously possible.
Sama, you mentioned, and actually, we are going to be taking questions from the audience. So if you have any, or think of some, just put up your hand. I think we are happy to talk for hours on this subject. but we'd love to get your questions as well, and feel free to ask very basic questions. Not everyone understands the ICPP and COP and all of these things. Sama, you mentioned Article 6, and that is the part of the Paris Agreement which has to deal with carbon markets and carbon trading. That strikes me as a trend or a policy lever that could be very important to incentivizing nuclear. Another big secular trend I'm very fascinated by is electrification, and the amount that total energy use, the proportion of total energy use that is electricity. And China in particular is really, as it builds out everything, it's also dramatically increasing the role of electricity in the Chinese grid. How important are those big trends and policy levers to incentivizing nuclear? I don't know.
Okay, so I will start, and of course, perhaps there are other experts here that know more than I do. So I think it is essential that we create all these mechanisms. I mean, so as you know, we have the Paris Agreement that is very flexible because every country, they have their own, they make their own decisions on how they are going to meet these goals. And then the COP meetings, we are trying to put a framework that incentivizes the right things. So I agree. Carbon markets are going to be a key piece of these mechanisms, and there are many other things. I think that electrification is a clear trend that we are seeing everywhere. I mean, you all were here on Tuesday when Fatih Birol talked about electricity is the new thing, which is not new, but okay. But we know that the future is electricity. I think that's exactly what Fatih said. So we are seeing this trend, and obviously in that context, nuclear energy is essential, right? There is not too many ways to produce 24/7 carbon-free electricity in a cost-effective manner. So, but then let me say one more thing. And also this was discussed this week here, and I think that there is the B pavilion somewhere over there, the beyond electricity applications. So it's not just electricity. Another thing that I think is fascinating that many people are still not understanding is that we can produce steam. We can help decarbonize the rest of the economy. So we've been having lots of conversations, for example, with the oil and gas industry. They are very much understanding that if they want to decarbonize Scope 1 and 2, upstream, midstream, downstream, nuclear could be a great deal, or the metallurgical industry, or the chemical industry. So there is enormous opportunities not only to nuclear, but to nuclear in particular, that I think is important that we capture them. And this is why the work that we are doing, Nuclear for Climate, the IPCC, and Net Zero Nuclear, World Nuclear Association, is to make sure that whatever frameworks, whatever mechanisms are put in place are technology neutral. So we truly have the ability to leverage all the tools that we have at our disposal.
No, just to add up that, yeah, with what Sama said, also the AI data centers, all of that will increase a huge amount of electricity demand. It has to be met somehow. Everybody's agreeing that climate change is a thing, it's happening, and we have the tools to help with that. And not only, of course, with nuclear, but together with renewables. For us in Nuclear for Climate, we say that together is better. And we think that not only from the point of view of energy generation as renewables and nuclear, but also for the different technologies in nuclear. So this is why it's very important, as Sama said, to be independent, technologically equal to all the technologies, to give the opportunity for all of them to participate, because there is always different necessities, like François-Marie said, in different countries, in different requirements that might benefit from very different technologies. So I think it's very important to all work together for it.
Juliette, I have actually one more question for you, which is, now that we have heads of state pushing nuclear, and it's not just it's not just pushed to the sidelines, but it's making its way into NDCs. There's lots of countries that are looking to embrace it. What is the role of nuclear advocates and the nuclear advocacy sector? What's next for you?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, as you said, we were like super rejected, right? It was nobody liked to have us around. But right now, I think that shifted quite a lot, but in our bubble. So there is still a larger bubble that needs to be, I think, burst, and we need to reach out to the people that are still hesitant about nuclear. And also, I think it's very important for us to give them knowledge and for them to do with this knowledge whatever they want. If they want to see that nuclear is beneficial for them, then great. If it's not, but they have to have the tools to understand what they are looking at. And what I find funny is that the conversation kind of shifted from like, oh, well, I'm afraid of radiation. And now that you understood radiation, because we had a long discussion about it, because we explained it, now it shifted to, oh, but it's too expensive. So if the goal is being, if the scoring point there is being shifted, it means we are giving good explanations, and that the real problem is not that nuclear energy isn't safe or it isn't beneficial. It's just, it's based on maybe another interest. So for us, the important thing in Nuclear for Climate and all the NGOs that try to bring knowledge to the people is for them to take their decisions, but based on science, based on evidence, for them to understand maybe in simple words or in an approachable way what is nuclear. And I think the most important thing our industry can do is show people what is nuclear, because we have an amazing industry, we have a very safe industry, and I think this is a crucial point that not everybody acknowledges, and we should exploit more and show more.
You want to jump in, François?
I fully agree, and I must say that even if the situation is indeed much better than it was 10 years ago, it's still fragile, and for instance, the fear of radiation or misconception about nuclear energy are still there, and very much so. And so there is definitely the need to explain more about nuclear energy, about the waste, about the cost, it's really, it must be done at all time, really.
Are there any questions yet in the audience? Oh, over here. There is, and hopefully.
Thank you.
Could you please introduce yourself and your affiliation before asking the question?
Yeah, I'm from Belgium. I'm an engineer in electromechanics and nuclear engineering. I do consultancy jobs with my own one-man company. In whatever, not necessarily in nuclear, but the global total energy consumption is about 180,000 terawatt hours per year. 1 gigawatt nuclear power unit can produce 8 terawatt hours per year. So we need, as a matter of fact, if we want to decarbonize the total energy consumption globally, we need about 22,500 gigawatts of capacity. So if you put that besides the maybe 10 or 20 gigawatts that the Americans and the Europeans have been constructing in the last 2 decennia, we are talking about peanuts, about nothing. Lots of talk, no building. The only ones that are building are the Chinese. They have 27 gigawatt under construction. Next year it will be something like 40 gigawatt. That's in 1 year. Allez, new extra projects in 1 year, more than what the Americans and the Europeans have been building in the past 2 decennia. Now there is a lot of fuss about small modular reactors. As a matter of fact, most of the companies have been downsizing their big reactor. It's not a real, they lose the advantage of scale, and they do not take the advantage of less in situ construction work. It's just a smaller reactor that is as expensive to build. I think we are nowhere. We are nowhere. Sorry to say so.
Yeah, Sama, do you want to?
Well, no, so you make a very big point, because it is a huge challenge, right? Nobody said this was easy. So maybe you actually have a question. Or,
yeah, you were talking about on the COP to triple the nuclear capacity, but we do not need to triple. We need to multiply by 550.
Your point. So if you look at, this is a very good point, and I hope you actually know this. When we came up with the idea of tripling global nuclear capacity by 2050, this was not a number that came out of my hat or anything like that. We actually did the math, and tripling global nuclear capacity by 2050 in 2018, which right now obviously we have different numbers, but okay, in 2023, COP28, 2023, that meant 10% of the global nuclear capacity by 2050 coming from nuclear energy. So essentially maintaining the same share of global electricity that we have today. So as ambitious as you all may feel that tripling nuclear capacity is, it really, you're right, it's not very ambitious. It's maintaining 10%. And you're right, it's a huge challenge. I mean, so tripling nuclear is 1,000 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity in the next 25 years. So this is 40 gigawatts of new nuclear every year, which maybe if you are doing the math, this is about 20 large reactors and 70 small modular reactors every year for the next 25 years. Clearly, we are not doing this. So you have a very good point. We need to accelerate. At the same time, you heard how in France, we did exactly this in the 70s and 80s. In Sweden, we did exactly this in the 70s and 80s. In Spain, in Baraka, we just did it a couple of years ago. In Bangladesh, they are about to do it. I mean, they're about to start their first reactor. So, yes, we need to be more ambitious, and we need to translate goals into actions. I agree with you, but we need to start somewhere, right?
No,
Just sorry, yeah.
one point. I mean, those numbers do show that nuclear is part of the solution, but it cannot be the solution, and it will be a lie to say that nuclear will solve the energy problem that we have. It's part of the solution.
Very good point. Sir, would you like to talk?
Hello?
Hi, my name is Ovais Rajput, and I'm from United Kingdom. My company name is Advanced Higher Education. And this direct question with Dr. Sama. I spoken with you one-to-one 2 days ago as well. How we can win the trust of the community. As we said, as soon as we say about nuclear, people become scared, and they have a lot of questions. They doesn't want to know, and they doesn't want to listen more about the nuclear. Similarly, in universities, because you, the World Nuclear Association, have the university as well, how we can recruit more students, especially in developing countries, so they can be our future nuclear scientists, you know.
Well, thank you for your question. And let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to try to answer your question in the context of climate change, which is what we are trying to discuss here. So I want to make sure that you all remember. So climate change is one of the few global challenges that we as the humanity have facing us. And this is a multi-generational challenge. So we are doing this right now, and it's actually, we are probably part of the original problem, but we need to be the beginning of the solution. But there is the next generation of people that are going to need to continue to this. So I think it is essential that we engage all the players in resolving this problem. So we need to bring the entire world community, all the different, obviously, men, women. I mean, actually, this is something that we haven't discussed, but women, as you know, are typically at the brunt of climate change suffering. So we need to engage them, not just in, they need to be decision makers, and they need to be a part of the solution. So I think that in the global nuclear industry, we really are trying to incorporate all this talent, all those skills, all this knowledge as we are moving forward. And you are right, we have much work to do, okay? So as we just heard, if we are tripling nuclear capacity by 2050, we need to triple global workforce by 2050, which means that we need to get everybody. And we really need to work together with universities, and we need to work together with governments to put in place the right industrial policies to actually make the most of those talents.
Thanks. Julieta?
Yeah, I would like to add something. As youth coming from the nuclear background, is just to make sure that you are engaging these young people into the workforce, to give them opportunities, to open up some programs for them that would make them getting close to nuclear. There was, I think it was, for example, because I say this because public opinion will lead to more workforce going to nuclear in the youth, for sure. And for example, Poland, I think it was, they used Minecraft to engage more young people into nuclear, and now they are thinking about implementing nuclear, and they are working on implementing nuclear as part of their grid. So I think it's a complete point of view that you have to take. You have to teach your people to not fear nuclear, and that will bring you more people into the industry, and that will make you thrive, because you need, as you said, Sama, all the generations in for it to work. So it's really important to invest time into listening to your young people, into pushing them forward in their careers, and to show them, expose them to what nuclear is, because it's an amazing industry.
Are there any final questions out there? Oh, there is one back here. You could just introduce your name and affiliation. Thanks.
Hello. Victor Savigny. I've worked at Advance and IRSN. My question was, as we all know, there are lots of ways to produce energy, and every country has its own mix of it. Like, for example, France has about 70% of its energy coming from nuclear. In your opinion, is there, I would say, an ideal mixed choice between nuclear, renewable, wind, and the others?
It's a great question. Which of you wants? François-Marie, do you want to start?
First of all, I want to make a correction. When you said that it's 80% of the energy in France is nuclear, is 80% of the electricity. 80% of the energy in France is fossil. Okay, because most of the energy is not electricity. So that makes a big difference, and I think it's very important because to stress that, because most people believe that if you decarbonize electricity, you are done, and it's not the case at all. It's not enough. And then for your question, is there an ideal mix of electricity? No, it really depends on your environment. I mean, Norway has 95% of its electricity that is from hydraulic because they have mountains and there are few. And for Norway, hydraulic is the best mix, definitely. And for the Netherlands, you cannot ask the Netherlands to have a 95% mix of hydroelectricity because it's a flat country, obviously. And some other countries, you have a lot of wind. So for those, there are countries that consume electricity more in the summer because a large fraction of their consumption is linked to air conditioning. And so for those countries, maybe the solar energy is great. And on the other hand, for instance, France, that I know well, you have much more consumption during the winter than during the summer, and which makes solar energy not so appealing for France. So I'm positive that there is not one optimal mix. The optimal mix very much depends on the environment of the country.
Sarah, do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to agree enormously with what he said. And, you know, this is what you ask is a very important question that we try to emphasize when we speak with decision makers and policy makers in the climate change context. We need to ask the right questions. The right question is not how much nuclear or renewables or whatever is going to be in the mix. The right question is, what is the mix that I need to have zero carbon emissions? And that is the question. And of course, as we just heard, the answer is going to be very different in very different systems. So we really need to make sure that our policymakers, when they are thinking about this, answering the right questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have one very short question. We have just 2 minutes left, so if you go very fast.
I would like to react on the question about does there exist an ideal energy mix? I think energy prices are global prices. Cost of uranium is almost neglectable. For nuclear energy costs is about 5% fuel costs, 15% direct operational cost, and 80% investment costs. So I would like to ask an analogy. Suppose you participate in a game and you have to travel a distance of 100 kilometers. And you have 3 ways you can do the travel. You can go by foot, you can go by bicycle, or you can go by car. What are you going to take if you want to win the game? You are going to jump in the car and race to the finish. So there is only one way that is the cheapest, as the prices are global. Solar panels, they all come from China, all the same price. Yeah?
So we have 2 minutes left. Do you have a question?
Nuclear energy, all the same cost globally. So there is only one energy that is optimal.
I guess we can end with that one. I don't think we have time for anything else. Thank you, sir. And thank you all. I think this panel, I'm sure we could talk another 2 hours about this, but we don't want to keep you from your flights. We'll turn the stage back over to Linda. Thank you so much.
So much. Thank you for this last panel. Give them a warm hand and give yourself a warm hand too. Thank you. Excellent. Thanks for great moderation as well. 3 days are over at WNE 2025. And we've had some, I think, amazing speakers on stage, amazing guests. And just during 2 days, we had 30,000 visitors. And you are some of them. That's fantastic. We are all welcome you back 2027. And that will be in December, between the 7th and 9th of December. 2027. It feels like far away, but things go fast, especially, I think, in the nuclear industry right now, within the nuclear field. So thank you all for attending these days. I hope to see you 2027, and have a wonderful evening and a great weekend. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.